Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't go all the way. Because I didn't get into women yet. Women in the church. So that's how I know where I'm at. So I probably did start it. Okay, so let me give you the bad news first. I got called at 5 this morning. One of our EDSO deputies was killed. And it basically looks like it was down in the other side of Placerville, like they call it Somerset. It was a pot growing deal. Great. I worked with this guy all summer. He's a great guy. His last name is Ishmael. But they rolled into this scene and basically were just under fire right away. So that's all I know. I mean, I don't really know any more of the details. It's a huge investigation. But he was really a good guy. 3 kids, wife. So, yeah, it was on the channel, the one in KRCA, the one in Sacramento. We don't get it anymore, but it was on there. Yeah.
You live up here?
No, he was up here for the summer, but he just went back down there. So, it's a tough, really a hard thing. I mean, we know these things happen, and now it's kind of, I can't go into details, but let me just say this. This is going to open up again the whole argument about marijuana and also illegals. Because the illegals are the ones that work those pot farms. I don't know if you knew that, but they do. They do. So let's just say the department's not happy with our governor. But it's a sad deal. It's no matter how you look at it, it's a horrible deal. So I'm sure more will come out, because we don't really have media except Sacramento, and Reno didn't cover it. So anyway, it's been a kind of a tough day. So I might have forget where I was, what book I'm in. I probably thought I was in, Zechariah, Zephaniah, Malachi, and I'm starting Malachi Sunday. Okay, yeah, I know I did. For there's one God and mediator between God and men, the man Jesus Christ, and then who gave himself a ransom for us, for all to be testified in due time, for which I was appointed a preacher and an apostle. And I remember covering that because I talked about. Okay, well I got to go back. I have to go back. No, chapter 2. So I did cover the part of it at apostle and all that, and let's start in verse 8. Okay, I know I did the first few, but let's go. Let's start in chapter 2, verse 8. Okay. I desire, therefore, that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands, without wrath and doubting. Okay. When we pray, sometimes you'll see people on a Sunday, but there's no look. I don't look around anymore. But sometimes people pray like this. They pray lifting up holy hands. It's just a symbol to God. Lord, I'm worshiping. I'm giving my hands to you. And that's kind of where he's talking about. Let men everywhere pray. We all need to pray more. And no matter how we break it down, Gary tried to do prayer like on one Saturday a month. I knew it wasn't going to work, only because so many of us are just, Saturday's a busy day. If you have kids in sports or you have anything, it's a bad day. But they had a few times. But to get people when they can pray is really important. Even if you can't, you can still do in your own life. Like sometimes all we can do is pray. And notice he said, for kings and all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. Now that's interesting because you want to be quiet and peaceable. But it's hard. When you have things you're involved in, you got to do this over here, and but that's the request. That was chapter 2, verse 2, and that leads down to verse 8. I desire, therefore, that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. Okay. In the like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with properly and moderation, not with braided hair or gold, pearls, or costly clothing. Okay. We now get into the second most controversial subject in the Bible. The first one is divorce and remarriage in the church, which I'm not talking about tonight. Okay. And when we look at the behavior of women. What are you staring at me like that for? So when you look, I'm talking about the one in the front row. So the idea here, and this has become, in our time, when Paul wrote this, there was nothing like there is now. If you look in our culture, we have people like Joyce Meyer. And there's many others like her, where there are women that have huge events and, thousands of people go and listen to her. And some of the conservatives will still say, that's not right. Women shouldn't be teaching. And then you have others that no, well, they're not teaching. But it's become an issue that we'd never had to deal with before. When I went to Bible college, we didn't have anything like that. We have no women pastors in Calvary Chapel. Of all 1,300 churches, there are no women pastors. The ones that have women pastors, okay, Assembly of God can, but they have very few. I mean, they could be all the Western U.S. has none. Foursquare, yes, Amy Semple McPherson. But in the Western U.S., they don't have any. But they could, okay. Then the more liberal churches like Lutheran, Presbyterian, they do, and they can. So they do. Catholic Church, far as I know, the Pope's holding the line on that, although they keep trying to get him to change and put women in. If you take a strict what I'm saying is, we're dealing with a whole brave new world, where in the old days they didn't. There wasn't any question. There was no question. Okay? So he desires, therefore, that in a like manner also that the women adorn themselves. Now, first thing is the dress code. Okay, adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls. In Paul's day, braided hair obviously was a sign maybe of someone that was wealthy or someone that was really dressed up. It's really not so much today. Like in the Church of God, women have to wear dresses. They can't wear pants. The first time I walked into one, I was like, what is this? I didn't realize it was like a rule, because they all were. There are a few like that. So it's not braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. So in what Paul's saying is that the women should be in the normal realm of where people are. And you would probably say in most churches today, that's probably how women they tend to be in that middle zone. Okay, just because they look good is not bad. Okay. We don't have anything that's comparable to this, braided hair, gold, things like that. The idea is, here's the idea. It's not how you look, it's what's inside that counts. And you really don't want to make a huge deal out of this. The ones that do, it's a war zone. I mean, you really don't want to. There's churches where the women sit on one side and the men sit on the other side. I mean, you can take this further than really what's implying. So, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. Now, think about this. In our time, who's going to enforce it? The pastor? So he stands at the back door and goes, sorry, you can't come in. Well, why not? Well, you just look too good, and you've got, really nice clothing. No, we don't do that. Now, I remember once when I was a lifeguard at a Christian camp, I'm right out of high school. I'm 17 years old. I graduated at 17. So occasionally there would be a girl that would wear something that was really not appropriate for camp. And I mean like a bikini, something like that. And I remember I would be the one to have to enforce it. That was a mistake. Because I'm a kid. So I go up to some teenage girl and say, I'm sorry, but, your bikini's whatever. Or you can't... And I can still remember some of the reactions that I got. They should have had a woman or an older or somebody do it, not me do it. But that's my only experience with the dress code. And then sometimes they would say you have to wear a T-shirt. Well, in some cases that doesn't help. It's not the best solution. That's my only experience. So I can't imagine someone coming in that was dressed so splendidly that we would have to say, I'm sorry, you can't come in. So these churches where they do, I know they do. Like if a woman wore pants, they would not be able to come in because they have to wear a dress. They have to have long hair. So if one of them has short hair, they're not getting in either. But see, they're used to that. I mean, I doubt many visitors go there. For those who go there, they know what it's like. But what's Paul trying to get across here? Okay. Modestly apparel, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. So the point is, there is a place in the middle that is the way they should be. And I'm just saying, I'm not going to be the one to enforce it, and I don't really want to, but I'm saying Paul did have in mind. In his culture, it was much more clear. It was much more clear. Most of them would come in like Raggedy Ann, because they didn't have anything. And then so if you did get one that was really dressed to, what do you used to call it, the nines, you'd really stick out. Well, we don't really have anymore because we do have a variety. It's like, how many guys on a Sunday wear a tie? A couple, if that. But it's not an issue. So some of this is cultural, but some of it is the attitude behind it. Like Jim Reed, chaplain of the Las Vegas Strip, has a great story in his book about strip chaplain, where some girl, I guess she worked at one of the casinos, and we have that. We've had that. But anyway, she comes in with like a mini skirt, and that's just what she wore. That's the way it wasn't like she just dressed that way. So the women went berserk. So the women went to the pastor and said, you can't let somebody dress like that come into our church, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, this guy, Jim Reed, was hearing all this. And he goes, I was so grieved that here this lady came to church and we're jumping on her because she had a miniskirt. And he goes, it's not right. So it was so influencing to him. He said, I'm starting a church on my own. And it wasn't the church of the miniskirt either. That wasn't the point. The point is these people were trying to control what went on. So he, Southern Baptist, resigned from the Southern Baptist Convention and said, I'm starting a church, and it was in one of the casinos. And here was his goal. I'm in Las Vegas. Do you know how many entertainers we have here? Right. Do you know how many casino workers we have here? And he goes, I want to reach them. So he'd go to all the casinos. He'd go backstage and say, would you have space for me to have a service on Sunday? And, he just told, I want to reach the workers. So he started, he had a little Volkswagen Beetle, and he put on the side, Strip Chaplain, Las Vegas Strip. And he drove around town with that. And anyway, it wasn't the kind of strip you're thinking of, not the Strip Chaplain. So anyway, and then, think about this. It was always, starting a new church, it's hard to get musicians. Well, these people that worked there said, you know what? We'll come and do music for you. And he says he had the most awesome group the first Sunday. They were all professionals. And they came and they were doing worship. Well, it grew so much that the Southern Baptist Convention that he resigned from took him on as a missionary. They said, we'll start paying you. Because they saw the result. And he goes, I love the people in the church on the hill. He goes, I wasn't against them, but I was against them screening who could come in. So he's got stories of, somebody would overdose, they call him. Someone was in a show, they call him. And he was going all the time as a chaplain. And it really was a great ministry. It's a great book. Praising God on the Las Vegas Strip was the name of his book, the great book. And, he said, I was a traditional Southern Baptist. He goes, I wasn't out to change the world, but he goes, I suddenly saw how these people looked when they were told they couldn't come in. So, anyway, but that which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. And you might see, like at a Christian wedding, I've seen every extreme. I've seen women that try to dress like a polar bear. And then I've seen ones that were kind of on the edge, like the kind of, okay. I'm just saying, I'm not going to be the one to deal with it. But you get my point. So we live in a much more complicated time than Paul did. But the point he was making was that women that are godly should have maybe a certain appearance, a certain way that they dress and all that. But again, you can't orchestrate that. You've got to grow into that, like people would grow and realize, okay, I really can't do that anymore. So this is where we get in the fun part. Let a woman learn in silence with submission. Now, come on. I need a bulletproof vest just to teach on this. In our culture, look at Helen Reddy. I am woman, hear me roar. What do you think some of these politicians are like? Now, when I was a kid, all the politicians were men. They just were. And then you gradually got one and two, and now it's kind of like there may be more women than there are men. I don't even know. At Barton Hospital, it's most of the positions are women. I would say most of the managers. What do you say? It's like 8 out of 10, something like that. 8 out of 10 of the managers are women. Well, the point is that's change. That's a change. Okay, so here we are, come along in the church and say, let the women keep silent. Now I'm going to tell you what I think it means, and I'm going to say this. First of all, the Bible says, the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So bear with me. Let's put them in one category, married. On the other side, we're going to put single women or divorced women, okay? Obviously, if you're married, your husband should be representing you as the covering over you in a sense. And in a strict biblical setting, the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So if you had an issue, you would have your husband go and represent you. That's ideal. But we live in an open society where women are CEOs, they're everything. So we have to look at what's the thrust of it. If you are married, I would encourage you. I've dealt with many. You could ask my wife this, or Sherry has seen this too. Where women are, you can tell they're not in subjection to their husband, and they come in and they complain about everything. And it's just the way they are. I mean, you want to say to them, how about this one? What's your husband think about it? Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Well, that shows me that there's no unity there. So, on the other hand, you've got women that are single, divorced, whatever. And the idea is let them learn in silence with all submission. And he says, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over men, but to be in silence. Okay, to me, a woman shouldn't be teaching a man. Now, I don't even want to get into Joyce Myers and all that. What he's saying is he would not have a woman pastor. There's no way. How can you be over authority? And like Paul says, I don't permit a woman to teach or have authority. So if the woman is a pastor, does she have authority? Yeah. Yes. So Paul says, I wouldn't do it. Now people say, well, Paul was a chauvinist. Well, I'm just going on that side of the train. We don't have women preachers. Now, I don't know if it's a deal breaker. I can only imagine in a movement like Calvary Chapel, if suddenly a woman stood up and said, we have a woman preacher. I don't know what the others would do. I mean, I don't think it would work. But we're independent. We're a free movement. We're not a denomination. But if you look at those that are women, it's really become more of an issue for us today than it is. Having the church elders. I appoint elders in every church. They're men. Now, women have ministry, and women have things they do, and women have things they're a part of, and they do it. But the men, if you want to call it the vernacular, the men run the church. It's the way it is. But any woman could come and say, I have an idea or I have a solution or whatever. But this is Paul. I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over men, but to be in silence. Now, I think that means, and to me, that means in a public meeting. Excuse me, if you have a question, I don't even care if you raise your hand and ask a question. But what Paul's getting at is, if it was a public meeting, just be in silence and come up and ask after. Or legalistically get your husband to ask, which we don't expect you to do that. But the idea here is women pastors. So I don't permit a woman to teach or have authority over men, but to be in silence. That's Paul.
We had 2 genders back then.
Yeah, that's a great one. What do you do with the women keep silent when you have 13 genders? Kyle? How's that one work? But you get the point. So what I'm saying here, some is cultural, but some is biblical. It's not just cultural. I mean, obviously in the Roman culture, women were like doormats in the Roman culture. They just were. So they didn't have a lot of freedom or flexibility. If you ever go to, like, even now, like some of the former communist countries, women, it's horrible being a woman there. So go back to Rome and go back to Paul's own experience. So I think, all things need to be in love, and I can't even remember where a woman was such a problem that I can't remember it. But I have had several, but I didn't do anything. So just remember what Paul said. And so a teacher have authority would be a pastor, a missionary, an elder, things like that. So that's what he's talking about. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. Now I know in today's culture, they don't like that. Because women want equality. And in Christ, we are equal. Okay? Men don't have a closer trip to God. No, they don't. We all have equal access to God. Paul talks about that somewhere else. But Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Now we know that Adam went along with it, but what he's saying is the woman, so like if you were a woman's liber, how many remember that? That's old. That's like 60s, right? Women's lib? They go nuts over this. I do remember one lady coming to me, and no, it was a guy. It was that guy in Fortuna. He thought women should be in charge, and his wife was that way too. And they came to me and go, look, that whole thing is wrong. Paul was this, Paul was that, and women should be this, this, and this. And I just said, well, I don't think that's the biblical model. Now you do have people like Ruth, Naomi. You do have women that were used. No question they're used to God. No one's questioning that. I think the only question is, are they supposed to be the leaders? Paul says no. Now, what if you have like women's ministry where they're in charge of women's ministry? Then they're in charge of women's ministry. They deal with women. I don't like to counsel with women. And I sometimes will do it one time to see what the need is, but then I'll try to bring somebody in to do it. Or I have Sherry come in there, or Diana. I don't like to do it. A lot, especially if it's women's issues. So when Paul says, I let the women keep silent in the church, again, he's talking about leadership. And let me just say this. If you've ever seen a woman that abuses this, you'll know. And I remember once I was preaching at the rec center, and here came this lady. And she really didn't pass the dress code either. She looked way too nice. And she stormed up to the front, and she was going to tell me everything that was wrong with Calvary Chapel. And I just stood there, and I wanted to say, well, where's your husband? Well, he's here, but he's not going to say anything. I think that's what it means. But I talked to her. I've had a few times where, and the rec center was dangerous. Because we had this up at the front, and I can still remember people coming up to me. I told one guy, and I guess it's confession night, I told one guy in the church, I said, you need to get your wife out of here before something more happens. I said, I'm not, just... And John Burrell was here then, and John took it over from there and said, yeah, your wife's out of line. She did come back. Yeah. But I'm just saying, I have been through both sides of this, and now I'd be more, okay, what's your issue? Talk to, whoever. Where's Sherry Sudan when you need her? Tell her. Talk to her about it. So anyway, recognize there's cultural differences, but there are the biblical difference is this. God wants the men to be the leaders. Okay? Culturally, this would be different in Poland, where they all kiss each other. And when I first went over there, the European women will kiss each other. It doesn't mean they're gay. That's their culture. The men kiss each other. I meet this Polish pastor, and he comes up and plants one on my cheek, and I was like, what are you doing? And I realized that's what they do. Is that if that was here, we would think they were gay or they're from that. You know what I'm saying? Over there, no, that's just what they do. You'll see women in Rome walking down the street holding hands. Now, the only time you would do this is like with your daughter. I don't know. You know what happens when we see that today? We sort of think, oh man, no, not so-and-so. But that's because our culture's that way. You know, we have these rules. We have these rules on, was it our, I thought it was the insurance company that insures the school and the church too now. You're not supposed to hug cross-gender men and women front on. They're not saying you can't. They're just saying, it would be better if you do the sideways, do the Watusi, whatever. I mean, in other words, it's like, no, but see, that's because of all the issues that have gone on. We had a lady thrown out of the jail because she hugged an inmate. And she was fine. There was nothing involved. It was nothing. But because that's their unspoken rule. Now, one of them told me, if we see you hug somebody, it's different because you're a pastor. But see, there's another kind of double standard. Like, okay. So there are cultural things. But women should not be in charge of the church. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. Now, on the other hand, women have a great ministry. They can be involved. They can do all kinds of things. They can have outreaches that we can't have. And so we recognize that. And in Romans 12, we all have different gifts. So women have gifts that men can't have. And sometimes with a really emotional woman, another woman is better to talk to him. It just, trust me, it is. Because we have female officers now, and that's another thing. When I was in the academy, I think I was in the first class that had women. But before that, there weren't any. You watch Reed and Malloy, 1 Adam 12, they didn't have women cops. Watch Joe Friday on Dragnet, there's no women cops. But there are now. But I'll tell you what, I have been on calls where, thank God, there was a woman there. Like one time in Houston, there was a lady who had her kids separated from her in Katrina. And then public service got involved and she's trying to get her kids back. And it was a female officer from Houston PD that was just hugging this lady in tears with her. It was great. I mean, it was awesome. It was better. You see what I'm saying? So I acknowledge all that up front. On the other hand, in the old days, we had one female reserve officer that was really attractive. And they were worried about who they put her with, because they knew all the guys were going to try to hit on her. So the sergeant comes to me one night and says, "You're taking her out." And I'm like, "Why me?" And he goes, "Because I know you won't do anything." The only thing I remember was, we get a call of a 415 disturbance. This is in an all-black neighborhood, which I'm only saying that because in that geographic area, it was a very rough area. So we go to the door, and this lady's gone, "They've got my keys. They won't give my keys back." These 3 guys open the door, and all of them were at least 6'8". And here I am. I said, "Look," and I got her with me. I said, "Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." Just me against them. I said, "Well, you gotta give her the keys." I'll tell you what. You give her the keys, and I'll just leave. No report. No one goes to jail. Nothing. Well, at first, this one guy goes, "Okay, you want to bring it on? Let's bring it on." And all I could think about was her, kind of like, because my upbringing was protecting the women. So I was thinking, I can't fight the 3 of them and protect her at the same time. And I was really in a tough spot. I'm grabbing the radio, send me a backup. The next thing you know, whoosh, here comes the keys out the door. Win-win for everybody. Here's your keys. Have a nice night. We get back in the car and we leave. But how many of you grew up like that? Like you protect women. I mean, you come on. You just did. Right? Now, what if you have a woman that's like, bonsai fighter, wants to fight more than you do? Well, then she might be a great partner too. But these are all cultural, where I would acknowledge the women are great with other women, and when there's children, they're the best. You have a kid that's missing, the women are the best. So anyway, Nevertheless, Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. So in other words, God's got the plan for them too, and, through childbearing and all that. And remember when Adam and Eve sinned, and Adam, of course, it doesn't matter that she sinned first. It was his fault because he was responsible. Who did God put in charge of the garden? Him. And then when she said, look, oh no, we can eat and we won't, and Adam did it. And then when God came down and said, what happened? He said, it's the woman you gave me. I mean, I love the way he says, you gave her to me. It's your fault doubly. You gave her to me and she messed up. I mean, think about it. Think of what he was saying, and what is God saying? Then let's go down to the devil. Who's he going to blame? It's the end of the road. The devil, I mean, he's crawling around the ground now. It's like, you messed up and you're done. You're going to crawl on your ground from now on. But the point is, Adam left what he knew was right. And I've asked this question theologically to a lot of people. What if she would have said, we're going to do this? What if he would have said, no, we're not? I'm not doing it. You want to do it, go ahead. Good luck with God. Is that possible? Yeah, absolutely it is possible. So when he says the woman you get, well, she didn't force a gun to your head and say, you're going to do it. There were no guns. Probably a bamboo spike, whatever. The point was, he could have said, both of them could have said no. And she could have said no, or he could have said no. Isn't it funny though how when groups sin, it's always somebody else. Even though any one of them could have said, I'm not doing it. So nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. So childbearing was a sign of actually the fall. And from what I can see, having been in there a few times, it's rough. But God created you to do it. Right? I mean, the guys are the ones that are the mamby-pambies. I mean, they're like, some of them can't even stay in there. I can't take this. Or they're sitting there and the wife is screaming at them, you, get away from me. In Lamaze, they show you're supposed to stroke your wife on the head. Oh, honey, be over in a few minutes. Get out of here. She's pushing the buzzer. Get him out of here. Have you ever been in one when really is going wild? Like everybody has some discomfort. You're the ones who really go berserk. And you're in the delivery area. Oh, it's rough. That's where female nurses are better. A male nurse in that situation, he's going to decide to go into law enforcement. But anyway, nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing. So it's a very interesting. If we were in Bible college, we would take this chapter for 6 months. Because we try to speculate all the issues about it. What's the bottom line here is he doesn't think women should be in leadership. And he doesn't think they should be known just for how good they look, but there's nothing on the inside. And how many of you, look, all of us have found that out. I don't care if it's a guy or a girl in their respective genders. What I mean is there are people that everything's about how they look. There's nothing on the inside. And if you get somebody that is really good on the inside and they look good, you got a double bonus. But if need be, look at all the movie stars where they look really good. They have the highest divorce rate. So obviously the looks didn't last very long. So we don't have women leaders in Calvary Chapel. We just don't. Now we have a female pastor at the Lutheran church here in town. And I kind of like her. But she knows that we're not in agreement on that. So it's not something we fight about every time I see her. I would just say, well, Calvary Chapel, we don't. Southern Baptist, we don't. Now, the Southern Baptists might ordain a woman for another ministry, though. They might do that. Like someone that was a jail chaplain or something where they're not a pastor, like we have. So there are some that you do that and recognizing they're in leadership. But can you see where this fits in with our modern culture today? People hate the church. And they think we are chauvinistic and we're this and we're that. And I can see with some of these women and men too that are not really following the proper role. And the next thing on the horizon is, and how many candidates do we have now? We had Hillary, and we have several now women that are running for president. So we've kind of gone full circle to where those days of men running things in our country, those are kind of gone. A lot of the CEOs now are women. So imagine Paul, if he was alive today, he would be saying, man, you guys really got your hands full. I mean, I could get away with it with Rome, but you guys. I said, and Paul, I'd like you to introduce you to Nancy Pelosi. Have you? I watched it tonight, just 5 minutes. All the Republicans stormed into the Schiff's meeting, and they had to cancel the meeting because they go, we have a right to be in here, and anything you're saying against our president, we have a right to be part of. It's a great point. And of course, I think they're going to do it every day. But the issue is we've kind of forfeited true justice and when we're accusing people. I love the one. Did you see your favorite candidate, Joe Biden, when it quotes him in 1998 saying that the idea to try to impeach Clinton is a lynch mob? What did you call it? A lynch mob? And then you complained about Trump saying it was a lynch mob. And they got Biden everywhere on that one. Are you going to keep watching that on TV? Here's Joe. That's a lynch mob. And then they got a few of the other congressmen saying it. Anyway. Now, look at how it starts off. This is the church. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. A man. A bishop, same word for elder. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. Now, husband of one wife is a problem for those who want women to be elders because they can't be the husband of one wife. They always bring that up. And I go, well, how do you get that in there? You can't. By the way, if this was a huge issue to you, then I would look for a church that agrees with you, not try to change one that doesn't believe in it. In other words, it's not worth trying to explain to me why we should, or if you think that way, then go to the Lutheran church or whatever. I'm serious. I mean that about any issue. Now you can give your opinion, like, hey, I think this, and I will listen to anybody, because I like that verse where God spoke through a jackass, and I'm serious when I say God might have the greatest idea I've ever heard through a person in the church. So I listen to him. You might have a great idea. So a bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. Not given to wine, not violent or greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. So not given to wine, the idea is that you can't be an alcoholic. And like it's true that if somebody wants to have a glass of wine with dinner, that's really not condemned in the Bible. What's condemned is the overuse of it. And, think about it. The guys that we're working with in the jail, I'm not worried about them having a glass of wine. Because they don't. They're going to go out and get plastered with a couple of six-packs. In other words, they're not arguing about the wine, except when they go, well, look at Paul. Paul told Timothy to take a little wine for your stomach. I go, yeah, and the operative word is little. A little wine. So someone who's given to wine is where wine is a major part of their life. You know what they say now? The latest description of like AA and other groups is an alcoholic is somebody that alcohol is a part of their life every day. They used to try to say how many drinks or how many beer. No, now they're saying, is it a part of your life every day? Then you're probably an alcoholic. Now, they never want to hear that. But that's the latest way that they're describing it. So, not given to wine, nor violent, nor greedy for money, but gentle. Now, greedy for money, I just heard a story of a pastor that went to his board and said, unless I get this much money, I still can't even believe it. I can't believe it. He went to his board and said, unless I get this much money, I'm out of here. You can get somebody out. And I thought, you know what? You just destroyed your church. Right away, 2 elders resigned. They go, we're like being held hostage here. And you don't name your own salary. You don't, and this just happened. The other pastors around are trying to tell him, look, you're going to regret that. That's greedy for money. Gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. So I'll get into more next week because I can't cut that part short. But anyway, so women in the church, God loves men and women the same. Women have the same position with God. It's just in the church, he's laid out a system of church government. And we have it in our bylaws. We just adopted some new bylaws that we had to do because these new bylaws say we don't believe in gay marriage. We don't believe in transgender. We don't believe in 13 gender. And you know what that says? You can't sue me now. If we didn't have that, you could sue me. But the churches that have it in their bylaws, you can't because that's what their church believes. Like, wait a minute. That's like suing the Catholics because they have communion in one cup. Well, that's what they do. So, the idea of if you don't believe in gay marriage, but I don't have it in writing anywhere, you could sue me and say they won't do my wedding. But since it's in there, the suit's gone. I mean, these were all hammered out by attorneys to help the church. So, because a lot of guys are afraid. I'm not going to do any more weddings because I'll get sued. What to do? Get sued. Might be good for you. Not really. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But so the whole thing that we're going through, men and women, you've got to realize it's a great point because now our kids are being taught that there's 13 genders. So we're talking about Paul just saying there's male and female, and the males do this, the females do this, and now we're going, wait a minute. And it won't be long till little Jimmy comes home and says, Mom, what does this mean? We've already got the one saying, Johnny has 2 mommies. And you're supposed to explain that to them. Do you know how far we've gone? We've gone so far that I think we're in the boiling water. We don't even know it yet. It's really gone beyond. Like people that are leaving. I just talked to a guy today. He's retiring in 2 months and he's headed to Texas. And I said, man, you're in the reverse. You're supposed to go to Idaho. He goes, no, I'm going to Texas. There's more jobs. And when there might be, I don't know. I don't know. But, we're in tough times. So, any questions? About women? Yeah.
It's not about women. It's stuff about men having to wear ties. Women have to have hats and all that. Wear dresses, not pants. Isn't that a bit Pharisee-like?
Yeah, it's definitely over the top. And there's very few like that. But it wouldn't be what I would say. I think if you do a detailed study of the Word of God, it's about coming as you are. It is. Now, those people that grew up in church where they wore a tie, it's okay too. If that's how you want to be, it's all right. But yeah.
Wear your best for God.
Yeah, that's how in the old days how it was.
And you don't want a lady coming in with, itsy bitsy yellow polka dot bikini.
Did you really just sing that song?
Gary's on a roll tonight. Yeah.